So as you saw in the previous lecture, we were able to build this graph, and you also saw that there are various ways to achieve your results. But the ones I prefer is to have intermediate results. So in this case, this was the initial data frame, and then I made some operations here to end up with these 3 additional columns. Now you could calculate these columns on the fly here, and you don't have to write all these lines of code, but I prefer to have control over the operations, over the script. So it's up to you whether you want to use intermediate results or not. So that was a couple of notes about the previous lecture. Now let's focus on this lecture, and what we will do is we'll add these segments vertically, and also we will give these grid lines a low profile. So we could either remove them completely, or we could add some transparency there. So let's work on the grid lines first. This is what we have so far. So here, let me join these 2 cells, like that. This is the new data frame. Let me delete this cell, we don't need this. And here is our code. So once we create the figure, then we have the title. And here we can apply the grid class, which has a property called grid line alpha. So as you can imagine, this is the alpha factor of the grid lines. So alpha means the level of transparency, and you can pass a number from 0 to 1. So if you pass 0 there, and you will get a chart with 100% transparent grid. So a good number would be 0.3. So this looks better. The grid lines have a low profile now, and I think they are enough to be able to see where these boxes fall in the X and Y axis. That's good. Now let's go ahead and add another glyph for the vertical lines, and the glyph that you want to go for is the segment glyph. Now a segment is defined by 4 mandatory parameters. The first one is the X value of its highest point, and the next one is Y value of the highest point, and then you have the X value of the lower point and the Y value of the lower point as well. And when you have lots of segments like we do in this case, you can pass lists and data frame columns. So the X value of the highest point would be df.index. So we have date time in the x-axis, and yeah, that's it. Then you have df.high. Now we don't have to filter out anything here, because the segments will be the same for every row. So x, y, and then the x will be the same for the next point, because those are vertical segments, so x remains the same, but this y value changes to df.low. And maybe pass a color there, let's say black, and execute. And yeah, we're almost there. So I'm sure you're wondering now, how do we get these segments behind the boxes? Yeah, I can tell you how to plot these segments behind the rectangles, but first let me tell you the reason that these segments were plotted in front of the rectangles. So if you look here, you see that we first plotted the rectangles in the figure object and then the segments. So this means that you have like several layers, and the first layer is added there, and then every layer after that goes on top of the first layer. So that means segments will be on top of the rectangles. If you want the segments to be behind, you have to add them first. So here we go. So that is looking good, and we can also improve the visual parts a little bit by changing these colors. They are a bit intense. So in the next lecture we'll work a little bit on the plot area and make it better. So I'll see you in the next lecture.